leadership from a Black woman's perspective. So thank you for joining us. So we're going to jump right on in because I know that time is very valuable and many of you are possibly carving time out for your lunch and really want to make this an interactive session and giving you an opportunity to hear from these great women, as well as having an opportunity to ask questions. So my name is Nikki Beasley, the Executive Director of Richmond Neighborhood Housing Services, an affordable housing organization in the Bay Area supporting Alameda, Contra Costa County. We provide housing to low to moderate income families through our rental portfolio. We are a HUD-approved counseling agency, which really stimulates a lot of the work of changing the narrative of home ownership. Because when I came on board in 2016, it became clear that many people didn't realize they didn't need a 700 credit score, 20% down to be able to purchase a home. And for those that are in the Bay Area, understand that if you're paying rent, you really have to, explore ownership. We're also infill developers building single family properties in the Bay Area, as well as we do quite a bit of advocacy as it relates to consumer affairs, Community Reinvestment Act, as well as tenant and landlord rights. So that's the work that we do. We've been around since 1981. And through this work, I've had the opportunity to engage and network with many of the women that you are seeing today. And like I said, it's not what you know, it's who you know, and you are only as powerful as your network. So I am very pleased that these four fabulous women have decided to spend some time with me this morning. So I did want to introduce them, share a little bit about their work, and then we're going to jump into a conversation if that's okay with everyone. So first, I'd like to introduce Ms. Noni Session. She is a co-founder, co-staff member of East Bay Prec, a co-op organization here in the Bay Area supporting Oakland. She is a third-generational Oaklander, a cultural anthropologist, has traveled the world and lived in other parts of the country, of the world, and so pleased to have her here with us. We have CJ, known as CJ. Carolyn Johnson is the CEO and director of the Black Cultural Zone, CDC, who is thriving to eliminate displacement in East Oakland specifically by securing and buying back our blocks, as well as having a long-standing career in real estate. We have Nikki Murkison out of the East Coast, New York. We have something similar, 23 years in financial institution, like me, I'm sure happily retired, and has now founded Pair Gap, also a thriving tech company to support those that are looking to build wealth legacy within their families and community. And last but not least, we have Angel Rich, who is the founder of Credit Rich, as well as written books, and has newly been acknowledged through Forbes of having a great relationship with Experian. So, what I said with the ladies as we were getting prepared, that we have all identified when we have a problem, we figure out how to fix it. So we have founders in the room today making great things happen. So part of this conversation was finding out the stories, because we all show up as well as Black women. We are resilient. We, put that smile on our face. We go out into the world. But I really wanted us to hear the backstory of how these women got to the place that they are today. And I know that the story matters. So Nikki, let me ask you, who is Nikki Murkison? What is your story, and how has your story gotten you to where you are today?
Let me unmute. Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Nikki, for inviting me to this panel with all these wonderful ladies to share our story. I would just say, I'm a mother on a mission to create generational wealth for my children and at least 2 generations. To be honest, like for the first time in my life, I'm just getting to know myself. I've spent really my entire life trying to fit in that traditional lifestyle because I've always felt like my life experiences kept me from getting ahead. And I've been trying to catch up to everyone else. But what I realize now is that I'm right where I need to be in my life, and my experiences have led me here. I'm from New York. I grew up in South Jamaica, Queens, in a single parent household. But I left home at 17 and moved 22 times before I purchased my first home. So home ownership is really important to me, and all of my businesses are really centered around wealth building through home ownership. But for me, it provided stability in my life. As a younger teen, I worked in retail. So since 13, I always had a job. I worked in retail clothing stores. I had my first child when I was 19, and it was time for me to get a job with some benefits, right? So I applied for a banking job. I got a job as a teller at Chase, and that led to a 23-year banking career. And to be honest, that banking career really changed my life. I was able to transfer my retail sales skills into banking and move up pretty quickly. I became a personal banker. I started originating mortgage loans at 23 when I had my second child. And taking a job as a loan officer was a big risk because, we worked 100% commission. But, we didn't close on a loan. I didn't get paid, but I was confident in my sales ability. So I really enjoyed working in the mortgage industry, especially because it taught me all about financial education, something that's not even taught in college. So I've helped thousands of people achieve their dream of home ownership, from wealthy people who bought $1 million condos in Manhattan to the rest of our workers that worked in the city, and they weren't from this country, but they pooled their money together in order to buy with their families. And at some point, I realized I was helping all of these people, but I didn't own myself. And at that time, at 29, I wanted to purchase a home, but my credit was not where it needed to be. So I had to make some sacrifices in my life. Me and my 2 kids moved to a basement apartment, no kitchen. We slept on a futon. We ate on we cooked on a hot plate. And I was able to pay off some debt and bring my credit score to 660 and purchase my first home. And I purchased at 29, and I really wanted a brownstone. So I'm originally from Queens, but I was looking in Brooklyn because I had done some research and I saw that the city was doing a lot of revitalization projects in Brooklyn. And this was 6 years before, the Barclays Stadium was built. So I was able to purchase 2 properties. And at the time, it was so easy to purchase a house. All you had to do was breathe. I'm sure you remember those times, Nikki. And so I purchased 2. And I couldn't afford to live in them. So I continued to rent. And plus the neighborhood wasn't there yet. I had 2 kids and I wanted to, at the time, it was called do or die Bed-Stuy when I purchased in Bed-Stuy. So I continued to rent, and really over the years, as I owned those homes, I struggled, right? I struggled with ownership. I struggled with dealing with tenants, increase in property taxes, utilities. As the neighborhood got more expensive, it became more and more unbearable to live. I was drowning. And then guess what? The market crashed, and it directly impacted the mortgage industry. So I had to figure out what to do. So I needed to increase my cash flow so that I can really afford to live there. And I was able to kind of negotiate with the bank to modify my mortgage, both my mortgages. And because Brooklyn's foreclosures were so backed up, it took me 6 years to modify. But during that time, I was still getting rental income. I didn't mention they were multifamily properties. And I was able to use all the rental income that I was receiving, and I saved it up to do some renovations. And then just really started playing with some housing models, shared housing models. I started with student housing and then went into co-living. And at the same time, I had to pivot my career from being a loan officer to going into community development. And then is where I realized that not only the neighborhood that I purchased in was changing, but a lot of neighborhoods across the Northeast, which was the area I was covering, were changing, and it was becoming more and more unaffordable for people to buy, especially middle class. And I fell into that middle class category, even though, now 15 years later, my properties had doubled and tripled because the neighborhood changed. I became a multimillionaire. I was making six figures, but I was still living paycheck to paycheck. So I really wanted to solve this problem where, in these neighborhoods, people would be able to afford. So I started my company Pair Gap, which is a real estate co-ownership platform that connects people to purchase property together based on compatibility. And I had already been in a shared housing space, so it just really made sense, and really creating a pathway for millennials, right? So if we don't create inroads for millennials to enter the housing market as homeowners, then their children won't have access to assets, thus increasing the wealth gap. So I really wanted to utilize this shared housing model as a way to create affordable housing and for more young people to own instead of renting. So I started Pair Gap, and it got to the point where I had to really believe in what I was doing. And so I retired from banking after 23 years to launch this technology platform. And now I'm currently in the trenches. I'm growing my company. I am playing around with my own properties and utilizing shared housing and building communities within homes. And the goal is really to help people who can't afford to purchase on their own, bring them together and have them purchase property and start to build wealth early. So that's kind of like my early beginnings. Housing was an issue for me at a young age. And I feel like my entire life has brought me to this moment to solve this problem. And I'm in a process of really creating this company that will eventually help to close that wealth gap.
Thank you for that, Nikki. I think you demonstrate when you live the experience, you definitely can, figure out the solutions. And I want to come back to some of the points that you made, but want to keep the rhythm going and ask Noni, because, you're out in the East Coast, she's out in the East Bay, and I think you will find some similarities. So, Noni, what's your story? How did East Bay Prep come alive, and share a little bit about your journey?
Thank you so much, Nikki Merkerson, for your story. That's pretty powerful and intense. It resonated most because I was also a teenage mother. I had my first and only child at 18. I think the difference for me, especially landing in the field of ownership, is that I had a pretty grounded experience with housing, in that my parents, who were raised in the projects, bought a home when me and my sister were infants. And so I grew up in the same place. And I'm actually speaking to you guys today from the house that I was raised in, right? And so I think because my parents had a strong sense of ownership, both of the asset itself, but of your community, of your future, of your prospects, that despite experiencing a lot of the same kind of dynamics of poverty and racialized economic oppression, because I did grow up in West Oakland, a lot of my sort of personal and academic trajectory was fueled by a certainty that ownership was the gift itself, right? That I brought, that we could bring, that was really part of the hope for the future of my community. So I did grow up with parents as small business owners. My father ran a grocery store right in the middle of what people now call the bottoms, what they might have considered a war zone when we were growing up, right in the shadow of the double-decker Cypress Freeway. So all my life, it was dark over there. It was loud. We have some of the highest rates of asthma in the region, maybe after like Fresno. And my mother ran a board and care home for developmentally disabled adults, and really engaged a lot with white dominant institutions such as the regional center and licensing, Napa Valley, Napa Mental Hospital. And so between their exposing me to both sides of the coin for economic mobility and all of the dynamics that really disabled our community. My parents were Pan-Africanists, so they really were into sort of verbalizing and deprogramming me around the narratives that were sort of put upon our community. I was able to kind of move through the 90s in West Oakland at a time when most folks' hope for their future was being taken out. I was able to move through it with a kind of hope that I could see a light at the end of the tunnel because I had already had a model from my parents. So I went to, as a teenage mother, I had my daughter at 18. I started my first year of college when she was about 6 months old, to San Francisco State. And eventually I started as a women's studies and English major. And again, I encountered more of the same kind of disappearance of Black, not to be immodest, but of Black genius, where you're a kid who's been reading since you were 4 years old, and you're interpreting classic literature in your white English class, and your interpretation somehow is wrong while everyone else's is correct, right? And so again, those walls that kind of disappear what we bring as Africans to the table appeared before me, and yet there was this foundation that I owned my own thoughts, and that a Eurocentric approach was always going to look to dispossess me of that truth. Eventually, I ended up majoring in Black studies and cultural anthropology, which is what led me to the continent. So having my baby was a whole thing, but I didn't really want to leave her behind to confront the same things that I felt was my pathway to break down. And so we moved to Zimbabwe when she was 4, and then we came back and we moved to New York to attend a doctoral program at Cornell University. And then we moved to Nairobi and a few other countries in the region for me to undertake my doctoral work in international humanitarianism, where again, I'm looking at the ways that white dominant institutions and complexes disappears African sovereignty in the name of a different kind of ownership. And so I just seem to, throughout my life, kept returning to this way that Black genius has disappeared under other stories deployed by people whose real function is to steal from us, to dispossess us of our history, of our truth, of our pathway into the future. And I came home only to finish writing my dissertation, and I saw the place that was mine, a tent empire rising. And just by accident, just by volunteering and trying to see what the heck was going on in my city, I ended up part of a group founding a Black People's Assembly called SOBO, State of Black Oakland. And then we launched a city council campaign, all volunteer, all grassroots. We only raised $10,000, and we came within 1,500 votes of displacing the entrenched incumbent, who was throwing the doors wide open to unchecked speculative investment. And because we ran on a cooperative platform, that is ownership of the self, ownership of your economic system, ownership of your means of production, it was clear to me that was a referendum. And that's really what spiraled into founding the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative, because what was clear to me the day after the campaign was that collective economic power was our next step to renewing a Black vision, Black unity, and building wealth and actual infrastructure so that we could reproduce that outcome generationally. So I take it all back to my parents' vision as kids from the projects who knew that ownership of the self, of the mind, of the body, of the community was the answer. And I think I still stand by that today.
Thank you for that, Noni. I'm just, as I'm hearing you and Nikki speak, I'm just, God, how blessed I am to be around you, incredible women. And we can be around each other all the time, but again, you keep talking and you learn bits and bits more about stories. And so I'm going to pass it over now to CJ, again, keeping in the path of conversation. I'm originally from San Francisco, born and raised. But there is a pride that Oakland folks have about being from the East and the West. So Noni has shared her experience from the West. And we're going to go over to CJ, who's also a longtime generational Oaklander from the East. So CJ, who's CJ? How did you get into this work leading the Black Cultural Zone?
Yeah, thank you so much. And yes, I am from East Oakland, but my roots are West Oakland. My great-grandfather came to West Oakland, and I believe I still have the address. It's on 8th Street somewhere in West Oakland, to work as a porter and sort of fleeing the Jim Crow South. He had gotten the attention of the law, and it was time to leave. And so moved to West Oakland, and my mom, who was in Oklahoma, would come out to visit for the summer and longer and stay. And she met my father, whose mother had moved them from Shreveport, Louisiana, for the same reason. The police had taken an interest in my oldest uncle, and she had to leave. And so she came and actually rooted herself over in San Francisco. And eventually both of my mom's grandparents and my dad's mom, they were both redeveloped out of those areas. So Bayview Hunters Point went under a redevelopment, and then West Oakland. And both families happened to be redeveloped to Russell City, which is where they put a lot of Black and Latino families near the sewer. And that's where my parents met. And my mom and my dad were married when she was 19. And so eventually, again, Black folks were redeveloped out of that neighborhood as well. And then they moved to Brookfield Village. And I was born when they lived in Brookfield Village. So I am born and raised in East Oakland, but I definitely respect my roots from West Oakland and my folks, because that's where we first sort of landed when we were here. I'm a mom. I have an amazing, amazing daughter, and I have a network of godchildren and nieces and nephews who are beautiful and very important to me. As important as the other folks I grew up with in West Oakland and East Oakland. Black folks grew up knowing each other, looking out for each other, borrowing sugar and egg and flowers and everything else. And we see each other as extended family. And so my passion for East Oakland and broader neighborhoods like those that I grew up in, which were primarily Black neighborhoods. Every business was primarily Black. That's what I kind of knew. We grew up in a time when Black Panthers used to walk me across the street. I was that age, and they had a building right on a corner right between my house and Highland Elementary School. And my father, although he wasn't a Black Panther, he was a supporter of the Black Panther Party, went to the regular meetings, was a minister. So there was this sort of religious conflict between what the Black Panthers message was, but him knowing that things just weren't right. The things that we saw in East Oakland, as it relates to how the Panthers are treated, I'll never forget. I mean, I can describe to you things where my faith in the system is not necessarily faith, it's an understanding that I always say we're living in the last colony on this planet that has not sort of been overthrown, that we're living in a place where extraction and exploitation of Black people is the only way that this particular system works. And yet we still have to survive and thrive in the system and figure out how to create a new environment for us to be successful. It is brutal. The way I see East Oakland now, when I left East Oakland, people would never believe is there weren't fences around and security alarms, but as crack hit East Oakland, we began to see the change. I was horrified, and I still remain horrified that that's not who we are. And I know it was something that was done to us and something we have to do something about. I believe in really studying our people, our history, our movements, our actions, not just here, locally, but throughout the world, to understand how do we elevate ourselves in a way that we can not just survive, but thrive. And so went to school, went to UCLA, thought I would be a doctor like everyone else. And then I fainted in my biology class when I had to do some sort of dissection of a human body. And the person, I found out later that they found, a lot of homeless folks that they would use as cadavers. And the man looked just like my uncle. And I was like, oh, I can't do this. And I began to think about, how do Black people wind up in this place? So I wound up, getting a degree in psychology and business, because my family, I was blessed as well. My family, owned their home. My grandparents owned their home. My great grandparents owned their home. And I understood, and most of them had their own businesses. So I've been working since I was 9 years old in somebody's business, doing something, bartending at 10, pool sharking at 11, whatever was needed. And so that's just what I knew. And so I really just moved into business administration and thought I would do that. My mom was a nurse. And so I wound up going and getting my master's in public health, and thought I would do healthcare. And I did. I moved to Brooklyn. I moved to New York. I married a man at the time who was from the South Bronx. And it was, when I went to New York, I was like, okay, this is rough out here. People in Oakland are always talking about they're in the ghetto. I was like, oh, wow. South Bronx was no joke. It was very interesting to be in New York City. I really loved the pace. It gave me a whole different exposure. I wound up buying a house in Brooklyn, Fort Greene at the time, way back in the day when it's inexpensive. And really, again, that whole real estate route, my grandparents, they own real estate. And I understood you have to own things. And we did the same thing. We bought a brownstone with a downstairs apartment because you had to pay for it. Wound up moving back to California because I just was not interested in living in the snow anymore, and just was ready to come back to California. But I left healthcare. I left healthcare, but I was working on a project in Harlem to develop a hospital and a mixed income housing project and a parking lot and garage. And I really, truly loved working on deals. So when I moved back to California and I got ready to have a child, and I realized I could not work the 100 hours I was working because I'd moved from healthcare to investment banking to real estate. I said, well, let me do commercial real estate brokerage. And so I moved into that field, and there were not a lot of Black people. There were not a lot of Black women, not a lot of women. And so, but it was fun for me because I'm a bit of a deal junkie, and I love doing deals, and I love learning about people's businesses and their ideas and their concepts, and understanding that. I still could not stay in commercial real estate because of the time when I had my daughter. I remember one of the partners, I said to him, I was like, how do you do it with kids? Like, I'm supposed to be at 10 o'clock at night and going to this party and this event and socialize and network. And he was like, just get a nanny. And I was like, well, I didn't have my kid to get a nanny. And he was like, well, then quit. And I was like, okay. He's like, because that's your choice. You can't really raise a kid. And I was like, well, I definitely did not have my child to not take care of my child. So I wound up getting into lending. And I worked for a nonprofit that lent to nonprofits. And I was just totally amazed at this world of nonprofits buying buildings. I was like, well, do they have money? How does this happen? How do they make money? So it was very interesting. I got exposed to that. But I have gone back and forth from sort of the nonprofit lending world or commercial real estate world to just being a broker, because again, there's just this balance of me being a bit of a deal junkie and loving to that. But also you learn so much about so many different businesses, so many different models, so many interesting situations, lawsuits. You learn so much. And I moved into taking that knowledge and trying to share it with folks, especially Black folks who I would see come in and they want to get a loan for something or they want to do a deal. And I'm like, the grandma died and they just got this money. And I'm like, do you have a business plan? Oh, please don't go and invest all this money. And I realized I wanted to teach a little bit. So in addition to all this work that I teach business, simply because I want to find ways to connect with people before they lose everything. And so I got into the Black Cultural Zone because, again, another organization I was sort of watching, and they, were talking about, when the whole place for Black people in Oakland, because especially East Oakland, the last bastion before it was discovered. And I kind of watched and I said, well, this is the deal. Why is it taking 4 years? I love y'all, but what's going on? And I found ways to support. But at some point they were looking for an executive director and I was looking to move on, and, it just made sense for me to apply for the position because I thought I had some skills to bring, and it was home-based for me. So it's all circular. I mean, I feel like when we leave our neighborhoods to go out, that we got to find a way back because we are, who we're waiting for. We are the folks. And so that is my story. I'm back. And I'm committed to really bringing all the relationships, talent, and skills and knowledge to really help elevate. Because when I look at these young Black girls walking around, I see me. because I was one of those girls. I fought, I got in trouble, I did all kinds of stuff, but there are pathways to be able to help yourself and to help your people. So I'll pass it back to you, Nikki.
Thank you, CJ. I can't wait. I can't wait to get into it because I'm sure I don't know, do we call you audience, listeners, those that are joining us today? Do you see the pathway of the journey? It all kind of, comes around. So Miss Angel Rich. Who is Angel Rich? What is your story? And how have you started doing the work that you're doing today?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor to share the stage with these beautiful ladies. It's always tough for me to know where to start with my story. But I guess in a sort of abridged version in my mind, it sort of starts with my earliest memory of me just wanting to be an inventor and sort of climbing into my bathrooms as a child and taking things out of the trash can to figure out what I could make out of it. And then my grandmother teaching me to read before I even started kindergarten. So it kind of put me on a little bit of an advanced level. And then fast forward, I started my first company at 11, selling custom greeting cards to members of my church and doing things that way, and started paying taxes at 14 with my first job and things like that. But moving forward, I would have to say going into college, I really think that it was the background of my younger years that really prepared me for the day that I walked into the library in college and a group of people asked me to lead them in a Goldman Sachs portfolio challenge. And I told them I didn't know anything about the stock market. And they said, oh, we're confident that you can lead us. And from there, I went over and saw the stock market and came up with an algorithm for it. And it was in that moment that my entire career path sort of shifted. I went from planning to go to Wharton and then work at Goldman Sachs and sort of have this whole like high-powered financial career into how can I become the inventor and entrepreneur that I've always wanted to be when I was a younger child, but may have kind of gotten beaten out of me a little bit along the way as you matriculate into high school and into college. And this was my senior year, and I had 22 job offers at the time. So I decided that I really did want to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't want to do it immediately, directly out of college. I wanted to figure out some type of company that I could go work at, that I could really be able to learn the field that I wanted to get into. Fortunately, another competition came along, even though I was kind of over competitions, and we won first place. We did extremely well. I just didn't want to do any more competitions. But this time around, it was with Prudential, and it was marketing. And my degree is in marketing, and my whole family sold life insurance. And my ultimate dream job was to become a global market research analyst at a life insurance company. So I figured if I won the competition, I probably could get that position. And so sure enough, we ended up winning. We came up with the idea of marketing life insurance and financial services online, as well as to youth, to Generation Y. It was groundbreaking at the time. I was featured in Forbes the first time when I was 22 for selling this plan to Prudential. And they, said that, why would we ever market life insurance or financial services online? And why would youth, people under 50 or 55 ever care about money? And so it was this sort of whole thing. Had a pretty great career at Prudential, became the author of the first ever African-American financial experience study. The reason that they are currently Blacks in life insurance commercials and financial services commercials now. Helped design a plan to bring the troops home for employment, housing, and education, leading President Obama's Veterans Initiative research study. And then in my last year, I made the company $6 billion, changing around problem resolution standards. And at that point in time, they gave me a double promotion and a full ride to Wharton and a few other things. And I asked them for $175,000 to take a mission trip with my church to Nairobi, Kenya. and they declined me after I had just, made them some billions. And I decided to take the mission trip to Kenya. And while I was there, I met a little boy in a Wharton t-shirt. And I had just received a full ride to Wharton. And, just seeing this little boy every day just sort of really got to me. And I realized that no matter how smart he became, he probably would never have the opportunity to actually go to Wharton, let alone leave Kenya or Nairobi or Salawa, where he was at. And so I decided to quit my job to create equal access for financial literacy for everyone, everywhere, and created the first ever financial literacy mobile game on the market. It's called Credit Stacker, similar to Candy Crush, but we swapped around credit types to be able to pay off your debt, achieve a high credit score, and learn from the multiple choice questions. It grew to become the #1 education app in 14 countries, top 5 in 40 countries, and best financial literacy product in the country by the White House, Department of Education, and JP Morgan Chase. After that, the app did so well, and we ended up, in over 60 countries. And, I had people coming up to me crying on the street, telling me how we prevented them from foreclosure. Other people, telling me how they got loans for over $150,000. And the impact that this app was having was mind-blowing. So we decided to extrapolate the algorithm out of it and turn it into a standalone fintech product, which we now have called Credit Rich. Credit Rich rounds up users' spare change to pay their bills intelligently and optimize their credit score as fast as possible. We are extremely proud to be in partnership with Experian, and I'm now the first Black American to have a partnership with any of the major credit bureaus. It's been truly exciting. Along the journey, I was named the next Steve Jobs by Forbes magazine, as well as one of the top 5 most influential people in the world of African descent by the United Nations. And I'm super proud to have my book, History of the Black Dollar, as a bestseller, and hopefully mandated in the school system across the country over the next few years. And that's a personal goal of mine. That we're excited to have changed those into some courses in partnership with a company called Answer Source. And we just partnered with Forbes The Culture, which is the diversity arm of Forbes, as well as Greenwood Bank, which is owned by Killam Wright and Paul Judge. So we have partnered with them to turn History of the Black Dollar into digital courses so that we can meet that goal of having this book in every school across the country, not just as Black history, but as American history. So thank you again for having me.
Wow, you women be doing stuff. People ask me how I get it all done, but golly. So again, honored to have you in my network. So thank you, Angel. So I'm going to
Absolutely, thank you. Oh yeah, and I just got engaged.
Yeah, the most important part. Maybe you can help us all
That
on
part.
that work-life balance. That part. So thank you for that, Angel, and congratulations on all the well wishes that are coming your way. I'm going to open it up to the panelists, and any one of you can answer. It's a rhetorical question based on how you shared your story, but I do want to uplift it for those that are listening. Does being a Black woman impact your ability to lead on the day-to-day? If so, how? So share with us, what is it being a Black woman doing the work that you do?
Yeah, well, I'll kick that off. I'll definitely say that, I'll give 2 quick examples. One, my first discovery of it. I was doing a panel at the White House, and on the panel with me was this Asian guy, and I really wish I could remember this guy's name. But I was on it with this Asian guy, and I was probably maybe a year into starting my company, maybe a year and a half. But I started off kind of like with accolades. And so he says to me, he says, Angel, I can't imagine what it's like being you having a company and starting a company. I would never start a company as a Black woman. And I was like, what are you talking about, Willis? I'm like, what is happening? What? And so And he was like, yeah, as an Asian man, when I had decided to start my company, people just immediately started writing me checks because they assumed that I would be successful. But here you are, one of the most intelligent women that I've ever met. And every room you walk in, there's a hand in your face telling you, stop, go the other way. And then once you get through that door, there's a whole nother door that you have to go through telling you to do this all over again. And he was like, I can't sleep at night because I don't even know what I'm doing. And I'm scared that I'm going to waste these people's money and they've given me all these checks and you can't even raise money. And he was like, so I just don't, he was like, it's hard enough being an entrepreneur. I can't imagine doing it as a Black woman. And I was like, and it like, my head exploded. And I'm from DC, AKA Chocolate City. I went to Hampton University, which is an HBCU. I really wasn't around other races until I was 22 years old when I started working at Prudential. So experiencing discrimination was not something that I was necessarily used to, or I guess even able to properly identify. I thought that the struggles that I was having was just simply a result of entrepreneurship and that we were all eating oodles and noodles. But apparently not. And apparently, I was a genius and I had a genius product and I shouldn't have been struggling at all. And so it's quite interesting when you see a counterpart that, just came up with like, how to put a lid on a glass of water, and they were able to raise $2 million from it. And then another example I'll give, my second point, is once I kind of went through that whole journey, I guess fast forward probably maybe 2 to 3 years later, I was doing an interview with Now This. And this was after I had been named the next Steve Jobs, after, all of the accolades of best product and all of this stuff. And Now This asked me, if you weren't a Black woman, do you feel as though you would be a billionaire by now? And I was like, yes, 100%. And, that video went viral. It did like over 1 million views in like 2 weeks. So I think that I could go on, but 100% in every aspect of business, I think that it is different being a Black woman.
Thank you for that. The other ladies, what's your experience? Does being a Black woman matter in leading, and how do you address it?
I think it does. And I think I'm also, it does. So I find it most obvious when I used to be a teacher, a professor that would go into the classroom and everyone would be waiting for the professor to come in, right? And it's like, I'm here, I'm actually here. And I think it just cemented the fact that, obviously we look different, we are different. And with that comes a lot of assumptions. And that can be used to your advantage. And I think that's just the reality, that people will definitely underestimate and they will definitely have their assumptions, and you should just be aware of them. I don't spend a lot of time trying to fight them because I don't have time to do that. But I think the other piece is that there are some positives to that as well. I know that sometimes being a Black woman in this society, we will probably have more opportunities than if we were a Black man. And again, we have to understand that. And in some cases, just because they're a man, they'll have more advantages. So I think, we deal with our Africanness, our Blackness, as well as being women. And the combination of the two has its pluses and its minuses. And I think that one of the things I love about Black women is that we're just going to get it done. And we'll figure out what we need to do to navigate. And I think sometimes that we underestimate, and what Angela's saying, how much we have missed out on because we are. So even though we go really hard and we do well for ourselves, Angel's right. She'd be the head of something major right now if she were a white man. But again, I don't think we have to spend a lot of time in bitterness, but it is what it is. And I think it's our obligation to reveal to the world. I was watching something last night, I forget the name of the actress, and she said, what's the difference in a Black actress and a white actress and winning a Golden Globes? It's opportunity. And so we will just have to create our own opportunity. So that, I think, is the difference.
Thank you for that, CJ. Nikki, Noni, what are your thoughts?
I would say that, being a Black woman in corporate America for 23 years, I've always, and just let me say, most of my career was spent in sales. So in sales, there's no color, right? The only color is green. So I had to move as if that didn't exist in order to be able to make my money and fit in. I remember changing my name from Nikia, which is the name my parents gave me, to Nikki, just so people wouldn't know what I was on my business card. So I've always had these blinders on, and color didn't mean anything because I was chasing a green, you know? So now I think that I'm feeling it as an entrepreneur, and being out here and really starting from scratch and trying to undo all of the things that I learned in corporate America. Because, you know, I feel like in that I was in a fishbowl and now I'm in the ocean. So I got to move differently. And so now I'm realizing that color does matter, you know, similar to Angel. I didn't really experience racism. And I think I probably did, right? But I didn't recognize it. So now I'm kind of, you know, I'm used to being in this white male game. The mortgage industry, when I started, and working in Midtown Manhattan, it was all white males, you know? So I'm excited to get in and jump in and go through those challenges and overcome them. And just to really come out on the end and just say, you know, I hope that I can say that it wasn't a factor, you know? So maybe I am still in denial, but I don't see color, but I'm fighting for people of color. So if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes all the sense in the world.
So I mean, that's where I am now. I haven't directly experienced it, but I'm sure I have.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to share a little anecdote. When I hear from Noni, what are your thoughts? Does being a Black woman matter in your leadership? Does it show up for you on a daily basis?
Yeah, I feel like I've had an interesting experience with, particularly in leadership, especially founding an organization that is explicitly trying to build into its processes kind of a different pace, for a different pace for bureaucratic organization, right? A more sort of care-focused pace, and kind of on a constant sort of arc of transformation, so as not to reproduce these Western dominant hierarchical power practices. So just on that front, obviously, we've loaded ourselves down with some responsibilities that means that we're not going to move like as fast, as quickly as Goldman Sachs style approaches, but also for the reason that we feel like it's a critical transformative process that we want to transfer back into, back out to the work we do and the places we do the work. So there's been something interesting for me about being a Black woman, leading a multiracial staff collective, in doing pretty intense work like the other amazing women on this panel, and then trying to be in that sort of self-reflexive care role that the work demands, but ironically also in that place that Black women get slotted in the work that they do, right? As like the mother and the healer and the holder. So it's gendered labor, right? And so because we live in a moment that sort of diminishes and criminalizes femininity and motherness, wombness, despite the fact that it's the greatest gift that we bring to the world, it also becomes the thing that over the last 4 years has kind of chained me to unintentionally doing other people's emotional labor, and has taken some energy and power from me that I've had to consciously, sort of structurally make space to reclaim, to reject in some way, and to rebuild, really, as I learned how not to function in these kind of rote and knee-jerk postures toward people who on the surface want something from me, but really under the surface are demanding something from me, are experiencing an entitlement to that kind of gendered emotional labor that transformative work demands, but demands less so from other figures that would be in this role. A man, a white man, a non-Black man, so on and so forth through your hierarchies.
So this is incredible. And a couple of things that have come up for me, and I'll just share a little bit about my backstory. So, grew up in corporate America, out of high school, had a career fair, thought I was going to get into fashion. So went to the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising. Thought I was, going to be in retail management. A Black woman happened to come into the store I was, working at and said, "I like the way you sell. Would you like a part-time job?" I said, "Sure." Became a teller. They quickly got me off the teller line because I was messing up. "Why don't you stand by the safe deposit box?" But I saw this Black woman. I was like, "Oh, I want to do that." And she was a branch manager. Moved on to another institution. Citibank became my home for over 20 some odd years. And I think for Nikki and Angel's experience, I'm sure there was racism. I was just happy to be in the space, and I just was in awe of the way in which I was able to navigate. But I'm sure I didn't make as much money, didn't get the same opportunities as others, but that wasn't how I was approached with it. And my backdrop as far as story, I'm just now in my mid-50s learning the migration of my grandparents, because they came from Louisiana and Texas. But it wasn't really until I got into this work and understanding what all that meant. Nor did I understand in, '09, when my grandmother left me her house, what that meant. I started to remember the stories, how my grandfather said he couldn't buy the house. He had to have his white friend buy the house in Daly City for about $14,000. And if I had known, I would have done a lot differently with that property. But then as we move forward, getting into this work of affordable housing for me, in 2014, when I officially retired from banking, I didn't have an exit strategy. I just said, I ain't doing this no more, because I had felt I had done all that I could do. And the worst thing I felt from a corporate standpoint is when you don't allow leaders to be leaders. I had done many things in the bank. I was a branch manager, but I could no longer make decisions on an overdraft. I'm like, what's the point of me being here? I didn't have an exit strategy. But through network, I found myself at Richmond Neighborhood Housing Services, and I'm so incredibly blessed because I don't believe I could have the voice that I have today if I was in corporate America. Fast forward to a conversation, a question I have for you in just a moment. With all that has happened in the last couple of years, and Noni said we are the holder of this emotion. So we either come back as too emotional, our points get lost in translation of anger, or we're that mad Black woman and we have to appease others to be comfortable with us in the places and spaces we sit in. So now, sitting in where we are today, how do you have to take second thought about how you show up being a Black woman when we know that the Black men in our lives are being traumatized and murdered, and these could be your cousins, your uncles, your brothers, your grandbabies? How do you infuse that emotion in the work that you do, but still show up and lead? How do you work through all of that?
Man, well, I'll kick this one off again, and I cannot wait to hear Noni's response. Because Noni, I think you should write a book on this subject. Truly, long story short, before I went on a show that you all have probably all seen me on, I had first originally wrote a letter to this show, and what I was originally going to go on was a topic that I was going to call Me Who. And this was at the very beginning of the Me Too movement, like way before Bill Cosby or way before they had went after any of the Black men. And I wrote this very long letter and article. And basically, long story short, I was feeling as though when they started going after the Hollywood men, and I myself have experienced Me Too situations with Black men in tech, with Black investors. It is actually a really big thing amongst Black women in the tech world, but we are extremely quiet about it out of the name of protecting these Black men that are in power, that to the outside world, you know, these major companies, they're giving them money, but they have no idea how they're actually treating women. I actually truly believe one of the reasons that Black women could get more money is if we didn't have these Black men sort of predator stakeholders. And this doesn't just exist in the tech industry. This is in every industry across the country and throughout our homes. So forever, we have protected the Black man, forever. And so the point of my Me Who article is, when is it finally, and this is, once again, this was before Black Lives Matter, before all this stuff kicked off. And I was like, when is it going to be the opportunity for Black women? When do Black men and even the country at large just come together and say, can we just focus on Black women? And if you were to really break this down into, you know, because I'm a statistician. So if you break this down from a factual standpoint, going back for 400 years, you've had the deprivation of Black people, okay? Then let's fast forward to the 60s, and we have the civil rights movement, as well as we have the women's rights movement happening. And just like even in the more recent Me Too movements, Black women have always been forced to choose between civil rights and the women's movement. And time again, whenever these matters come up, it's always, oh, well, what about the Black man? And then because you have the Black men as well as men that are in power, and of course, yes, 100% they are being wrongfully killed and all of these various different things, that still does not neglect the fact that the Black woman is taking the brunt of everything every single day. So when is it going to be our time in history that people pause and focus on us? So I just kind of wanted to put that out there. I'm curious what
you had to clutch your pearls about that one.
Yes, no, when I tell you this really actually for real in real life bothers me, like in real life this bothers me. I even wrote a book. I wrote a book right here. This is how serious I am about this. I wrote a book called Black Woman Politics, where I went all the way back to Sojourner Truth, and I researched every single speech that had been given by a powerful Black woman in the country to speak on behalf of Black women, because I wanted to know for myself if we have been repeating the same requests since the beginning of time. And we have. Not only have we been repeating the same things, but we have been the people, and again, I encourage people to get this book. I don't promote this one as much as my other one, but this is a gem if you're into this type of knowledge. Not only have we been repeating the same type of things, but we have been the pivotal people each time. This whole thing with us putting President Biden and Kamala Harris in office, this isn't the first time that we've influenced politics on a major scale like this. It's almost every time that we are the people that are in the background, yet we get diminished to the side. Black women outperform other businesses by 35%. Okay, so from a business perspective, it just does not make logistical sense as to why we continue to be downtrodden. But I'm gonna get off of this because I can talk about this all day.
Let's get everyone's final comments, because it does look like we do have
woman politics.
We do have some conversations going on in chat. So any final comments to that question? You know, us being, which kind of back to why we're doing this today. When will there be a focus on Black women, acknowledging all that we hold? And I think, you know, Noni brought it up in such a gracious way about us being the holder of all of this. So Noni or Nikki or CJ, any final comments? Because I would like to open it up to those that are joining us this afternoon.
I'd like to first thank Noni and Angel for bringing up the history, because as I said, I've ignored it for so long, but I can't anymore because I have a daughter, right? And I intentionally sent her to a HBCU because I'm ignorant around, the history. So I want to make sure that she gets all of that history. She can see Black women in successful growth. I just love HBCUs. So she teaches me a lot. But I also have a Black son, and I also have to set an example for him as a woman, and them watching me, leave my career and supporting me through this. And now my son actually works for me. So I just transferred my wealth, my company to him so that I can do it while I'm still alive. So I think that now more than ever, this is why I want to thank you ladies, because sometimes I feel guilty about, just moving in the moment and just trying to get ahead. And I'm sorry about that. Just trying to get ahead and not really looking back at the history. So, I intend to be more present. So, that's what I have to say about that.
And I'll be quick. I have mixed feelings around that. I, have lots of, I get everything that everyone is saying, and I have mixed emotions around it. I definitely think that we should figure out how we can support each other, have private conversations with our Black men, our brothers, our nephews, our cousins around our situation, and make specific and clear asks about what we need. Understanding that we are viewed differently in this country, for better, for worse, but this is endemic around the world. I was just listening to some things happening in Afghanistan to women there. So there's a female-led conversation, and I think if we're looking for acknowledgement, if we're looking for support, if we're looking for credit, if we're looking for whatever we're looking for, we can demand it and we can ask for it and give them an opportunity to respond. And to, there's a range, like a range of Black women, there's a range of Black men. And, I haven't come across, what Angel has experienced from Black men at all, but doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And I think that it depends on proximity to power and how you get folks who've been deprived of power to decide who they're going to model themselves after, an exploitive, extractive white male force, or that maybe that's how they roll, or are you going to be something different? And that comes down to some ego stuff and hormone stuff and testosterone stuff that I can't relate to. But I think that we need to be very clear about what we insist on and make that a consistent statement around all Black women as to what we're going to take, what we're going to do, what we're going to have, who we're going to be, and what we expect from our partners in life.
Yeah. And I think it's real too from the history. This goes way, way back. It's in our DNA, how and why we show up the way that we do. So this is the time for those that are joining us this afternoon to chime in the conversation, ask questions. While we do that, a question has come up: how can people get access to your book and or audio? So if you want to put that in the chat, that'd be great. But any thoughts from those who are joined us? Okay, did we just drop the mic? Everybody just taking it all in. Aaron.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, Aaron.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
So I apologize for joining late, but I just joined maybe 10 minutes ago. So one of the reasons why I wanted to join this conference call was because of the fact that I work for the Auto Club of Southern California, and we are pretty much expansive throughout the entire US and 21 different states that we do business in. And we just started a BRG program for a variety of different groups. We have one for women, we have one for Latinx, we have one for LGBTQ+, and we have one for our African American employees. And one of the key things that our groups meet on is, development, bringing your true authentic self to work. But we're trying to expand that now into the networking importance. And I think it was Angel that was specifying. I think you brought it up also, Nikki, about empowering our Black women that work here to take more of a stance and take more ownership and take more of a leadership role within their business. So we're trying to expand on mentorship programs, but how do we as an organization or any organization focus on these mentorship programs that are highlighting Black women specifically into these programs? I mean, one of the things we're looking at is filtering the groups out into pretty much open to whoever wants to be a mentor. But I think there's a different way of focusing on the Black women to make sure that they have a voice that stands out and that they can show what their talent is within the company.
Well, thank you for that, Aaron. And you mentioned, was it BR? What was the acronym you used?
I'm sorry, it's called a BRG, which is also known as a business resource group, but they're also known as ERGs, like employee resource groups.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll kick it off. I think one of my greatest skills in my career has always been about networking. I always wanted to be a value add to any conversations. If you needed something, I would have 3 or 4 resources. But for this conversation, I think it is a willingness on both the mentor and the mentee to participate in the conversation, but also provide a safe space. Meaning that if an employee really were to be real transparent, that there would not be any backlash, especially if, comments, concerns were uncomfortable to others. So I think versus companies really providing a safe place, not just in words, but truly making people feel comfortable of having real conversations. And then also what I have seen that could be a value add is it not being, we're coming here to rescue you, we can solve all your problems, because we know what the issues are. We have some real insight on what the solutions are, so providing a space. But does anyone else from the panel want to share?
I'm sure. I've actually done this work a lot. A lot. So first, Aaron, and you could be honest or you don't even have to answer me. But the questions that I would first kind of think about is, number one, what is it that you are looking to change? Number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, how serious are you about actually implementing that change? Is this a check the box thing? Do you want to maybe change one thing a year, 3 things a year? You want to kind of like in an ideal world, just change the company culture as best as you can, like really having an understanding for the amount of investment and capacity that you're looking to put into this is really good. Number 3, an actual timeline. The number one way to upset a group of Black women is to gather them together, waste their time, and tell them you're going to do something that you don't actually do. So you might as well just don't even have the meeting, okay? So you need to have like an actual timeline. Like you're going to walk in and say, on day 1, we're going to do this. By the next 30 days, we're going to gather up your problems. And within, 60 to 90 days, we're going to define some solutions. And within 120 days, we will have implemented at least one of these solutions that we have voted on. Like there needs to be actual timelines, not just, we getting together for tea every 2 weeks. So really kind of outlining that and putting it together. And then I would say, fourthly, if you agree to all 3 of those things, is putting together what I would identify as sort of team captains. Black women can be very, we always looking to be on top. So having some type of structured way to either vote for a leader or the company has identified a leader that the group of Black women like. Not somebody that's a mole for the company, but the group of Black women will actually support, or you let them select and vote their own leader. And then last but not least, having an actual efficient process for collecting and voting on the information. Step 1, I usually start by talking with various different leaders and getting their different points of view, people that kind of already have kind of done the work already. Step number 2, having some type of focus group where you're gathering them all together. And then step number 3, once you have the information, putting that into an actual quantifiable survey that you then send out so you can have metrics around it. So when these people are voting on what they actually decide to implement, you have the metrics behind it. So that's going to cost you $150,000. I shall send you my invoice, Aaron, and I put my my email in the chat.
And Black women leading it, if it don't make no money, it don't make no sense. Ain't nobody got time for a glorified hobby. So does anyone else want to comment on Aaron's question before we, I see Monica has her hand raised. Anybody else have something to say before we move on? Okay, well, thank you for that insight. Monica, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, no, thank you. Nikki, to everyone, my name is Monica Wilson. I wear many hats in community and economic development, affordable housing, have for 30-ish years. But I'm also on Nikki's board, and I just want to from my heart, I feel like my voice is trembling, how beautiful this meeting is and this event. It's just so beautiful. I have been on the board since Nikki jumped on the board, and I tell you what, she is taking care of her business, our business, and the business of diverse communities. And it's exhilarating and beautiful to see, and I want to support her. And however I can support this whole group, I want to support. One thing I want to share is that in addition to the hats I wear, I also run an internship for first generation BIPOC students, and we have done exceptionally well. This is our 10th year. I'm going to say we've delivered over 100, I'm going to call it 120 internships for young women and young men of color. One of our participants, one of our interns right now is on this call. She's going to jump in shortly after and introduce herself because she's a baddie. She is brilliant. She works with me and we're learning about development together. I happen to be on a beautiful team with Charmaine Curtis, Michael Simmons, and YCD, developing 140 units of affordable housing in Mission Bay. And Mariana's on that too. Welcome and introduce you to the next real estate developer, Mariana Senegal, when she jumps on. Thank you so much. I'll put my intern email extension. Please, please, please send any and all young adults, whether they're graduating in high school or in college, my way for next summer. Thank you so much. A lot of information. I do deliver, Angel, too, so put me to work.
Thank you, Monica. Appreciate your kind words, and thank you for your graciousness of being an awesome board member. We have NT. Your hand is up. Go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, hi. Yeah, it's Nicole. Sorry, Nicole Tobar. Yeah, so I think you kind of sort of spoke on it a little bit, Angel, which I really appreciated because I was thinking about diversity and inclusion, like task force or committees that are kind of I feel like are popping up a lot. And they're getting a lot of, I guess, support, but I find them to be very inefficient and unsuccessful and unsustainable a lot of times. And the only reason why I say that is because a lot of times what tends to pan out in my observation is that the goals are not clear. Like, what does diversity mean? Like, what do we mean by diversity? What does that look like? A lot of times that's not clear. A lot of times key decision makers are not involved. And I think that's really important too. And then also when people are elected, they're more or less, I guess, figureheads, more or less. They're just faces, kind of like the tokenism. And so I guess my question is, how do you make these particular committees actually effective? Like, what are some things that can be done and supported and make it sustainable so that when you are having these diversity inclusions, you actually do see an increase in Latino hiring, in Black hiring, in women hiring, because I've noticed, particularly in the tech, we have a huge population of Indians and whatnot and Asians, but nothing else really outside of that. And then if you do see any diversity, it's usually in services like janitorial services, reception, security, contractor work. So how do you make it so that it's just effective so that we are actually getting the diversity that we're seeking?
Yeah, so, I've spent a lot of time over the last few years researching this answer myself. I just left Louisville 2 days ago. I did a thing with the YMCA there on Saturday. The Louisville YMCA has a really good program. And I'll kind of use them as my example of where I feel like a good BRG. And I also led a BRG at Prudential. Basically, this is the honest truth of it. Number one, the leader has to be on board. So, you know, especially if it's not of a Black race, they definitely need to be fully on board. You need to understand where their boundaries are, like how you know, how much at the cookout are they? You know, are they just eating the greens? Are they eating the pork and beans and the potato salad? Like, what's happening? Like, how much are they involved at the cookout? And so the person that is, you know, pretty much in control of the money as well as the programming, it is essential that they are on the same page, regardless of whatever color they are. Usually that person is not Black in many of these instances. It would be the actual CEO of the company, or, you know, whoever it is that has to sign off on this budget. Then number two is the leader, and that is the BRG leader. Usually that person is Black. Now, what is to be avoided in that situation is exactly what you just said, having the tokenism. That usually comes when that person is appointed by the organization. What I have seen that works better is for it to actually be, for them to be elected by the body. That way the body feels as though that they selected the person, they can trust the person, and they've put, you know, their person up. So that goes a long way. Then underneath of that, you need your sort of second Black person, if you will, the VP of the organization or the secretary or whoever this person is going to be. This person also does not have to be Black, the second person. This second person definitely could be of another race as well, but they have to be definitely fully on board with the cause. You know, they outside, you know, with the picket fence, like they are doing everything. My second person actually is Caucasian, but please believe she goes harder than me. So your second person has to like control the logistics. You know, they're making sure that everything is running. They have the timelines. When you ask them for something, they're on it. And then last but not least, you have to have a budget. And oftentimes when people are trying to scramble and fundraise for stuff and they don't take the time to do it a year in advance, and where you go to the sponsors ahead of time and you sort of already have the programming lined up, where you're not sort of coming at the last minute within sort of a 3 to 4 month window, the more organized you are, the further out. Now, at the same time, with that organization, you also need to be able to have a little bit of flexibility. So if something like the Black Lives Matter pop up or Juneteenth pop up, you need to be flexible enough to adopt and actually do something. If you have those 4 pieces and everybody's on the same page, you don't have groupthink, you have communication, you're sending out surveys where stuff is quantifiable, then your BRG will actually work and be successful.
Thank you for that. And
Thank
hopefully,
you.
Nicole, it sounds like you've gotten some healthy tips on how to hopefully move the work that you're trying to lead forward. So we are about 15 minutes before closing. So I would like to bring it back to the panel. And again, if you have questions, please raise your hands. We'll be sure to get to them. But for the panel, after what you've heard today, I'm going to ask you for this last question. Do you bring your flowers to your table often enough? Number one, do you actually sit back and think like, yeah, I did that? And how do you feel when you do? And then the second part of that, as I mentioned before, that little girl, what is she saying about you today? Is she surprised? Or it's like, yeah, I've been knowing that was going to happen. So I'm going to hand it off to Nikki. Those 2 questions. Do you give yourself flowers enough? If so, how do you feel about it when you do? And what is little, and share with me your given name, Nikki?
Nikia.
Nikia. Share with us what little Nikia is saying about you today.
Yeah, sure. I do not give myself enough flowers. I'm learning how to do it. I'm always, I feel like I'm still in a struggle. I've always lived my life like I'm drowning and trying to tread water. So I don't even know how to get out of that, right? I'm constantly in that. So I don't have time to kind of give myself flowers. But I am learning that is healthy and I need to do it. And if little Nakia was to see me now, she would be very proud that I not only am trying to solve, I not only solve my own problem, but now I'm trying to solve a housing issue for Black people, right? So I think that at the time I didn't know I was doing it, but now, I'm kind of getting in my groove, and I think that my younger self would be very proud.
Thank you for that, Nikita. Noni, do you give yourself flowers enough? How do you feel about it when you do? And what would little Noni say about you today?
I think I give myself flowers in my dreams because I dream a lot about the great things that are happening now and in the future. My little Noni, actually, I'm pretty happy to say, really likes me. She always thought that we should be doing things particularly grounded in being good to one another. So she's super proud that I get to kind of yell that from the rooftops. With my little, I don't know, gold star on my chest or something.
Go ahead, no, finish your thought.
Oh yeah, I think I'm finished.
Okay, I just love that smile. CJ, do you give yourself your flowers enough? And if you do, how do you feel about it when you do? And what would little CJ or Carolyn say about you?
I think that I do give myself flowers. I definitely try to take care of myself. I definitely get my breaks. I definitely take my vacations. I definitely know who I am and what I'm doing. And so, yeah, I think I don't demand flowers from other people enough, but I definitely give myself the flowers. And little CJ, or if you knew me from East Oakland, KK, which is a whole nother story, would definitely say it's about time. I don't know what you were doing running around investment banking and all this other stuff you were doing, but you were meant to do this work. And so thank you for finally getting back to what you promised yourself decades ago. So yeah.
Thank you for that. Miss Angel, do you give yourself flowers? If so, how do you feel about it? And what would little Angel say about you today?
Wow. Well, no, I don't really give myself as many flowers as I should. I'm learning to do that more. I did the NASDAQ Accelerator last year, and they literally made me go through like this 6-month therapy CEO thing. And it was all about like celebration and, honoring yourself and giving yourself flowers. So I've come light years over the past year, I believe. And then my fiance, he buys me flowers every single Friday. So it kind of allows me to take a moment and kind of appreciate that. And then for the second part, I tussle with this question a lot myself, because little Angel was just as tough as present day Angel. And if not, maybe even tougher. I used to read 22 books a week and I made straight A's in school. So this has actually been a little bit less strong personality. And young Angel didn't play any games. So we didn't have time for nonsense. So I think that young Angel would be proud and would be like, why aren't you the richest person in the world yet? Like, what's taking so long? But at the same time, just like how I feel about myself now, I have a very humble perspective, like, wow, that's dope. I can't believe, we got a partnership with Experian. Like, that's bananas. And then the other part is me like, watch out, world, we about to set it on fire. So I think young Angel would have the same perspective. She'd be like, wow, that's cool. You've been all those places, you got named this. But at the same time, she'd be like, what's up, chick? Why don't you have 10 companies by now?
Well, let me say, there is this old adage of you are the sum of the 5 you hang with. Well, there's 4 of you ladies today. So if I can, take any of the energy that you've shared with us today, I too, will be smiling ear to ear. I want to say thank you. This was just an idea, thought. Thank you for saying yes. I have heard that, people want more of this. So who knows? Maybe this will be a staple within the work that we do, because I think we have to take care of self, and sometimes just being encouraged by others that look like us, talk like us, can give us that added motivation. I see that, is it Mariana? I see your hand is up.
Hi, my name is Mariana. I would personally like to thank all 4 of you women, including Nikki, for just being here and being present and giving, feedback on business and things of that sort. And me personally, since I am currently 18 and trying to pursue real estate development while also doing business, I find this Zoom meeting very fascinating and something also somewhat encouraging. Like as what Nikki Merkson said, I feel that we share similar things in life. So just hearing from all of you guys different perspectives have really encouraged me to just remain strong and push through all my obstacles in life, because no matter what, at the end of the day, it's going to make me or break me, but I'm still going to, learn from it. So I feel like that's something just very important.